right, so we'll call the City Council public hearing of June 17th, 2020 to order. Roll call, please.
Mayor Copeland is absent. Tom Baylor,
Here.
Kathy Sherman,
Here.
Jeff Guard,
Here.
Melina Meyer,
Here.
Ann Schaefer,
Here.
David Allison,
Here.
and David Gleason is absent. That's a quorum of council.
Okay, the mayor just arrived, so we'll give him a minute to get settled in and he'll read the ordinance.
Okay, we have ordinance number 1188, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, amending Cordova Municipal Code Section 5.40.030 to update language regarding sales tax exemptions and adding CMC 5.40.025 to identify classes of buyers exempt from city sales tax and to exempt sales, services, and rentals to federally recognized tribal entities from city sales tax. Is there anyone in the public who would like to testify to that ordinance? Okay, I'll move on to the next ordinance, and then public can address either. If we have a call in, that number again is 253-6202. The second ordinance in the public hearing is emergency ordinance 1189, and that's an emergency ordinance of the Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, adopting the City of Cordova COVID-19 recovery plan and ratifying emergency order 2020-09. And again, if you'd like to call in and participate in this public hearing, the telephone number is 253-6202. Okay, we don't have any one on the line at this time. We'll recess until we get a call here. Okay, so just for public's benefit, we're having our public hearing on two ordinances, 1188 and 1189. The first is amending the Cordova Municipal Code to update language regarding sales tax exemptions and adding Cordova Municipal Code, Section 5.40.025, to identify classes of buyers exempt from city sales tax and its exempt sales, services, and rentals to federally recognized tribal entities from city sales tax. The second ordinance up for public hearing is an emergency ordinance of the Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, adopting the City of Cordova COVID-19 Recovery Plan and ratifying Emergency Order 2020-09. And if you'd like to call and speak to either of those items, the telephone number is 253-6202. And you can just wait until you're taken off hold, and then you'll have 3 minutes to testify. That number again is 253-6202.
Should we play Pandora while we're waiting here?
So again, we're in recess, waiting for calls for public testimony on ordinances 1188 and 1189 during our public hearing.
Are we still off mute? Okay. Okay.
I swore I threw a couple in my pockets and I can't find them. Can you see who logs in there?
On YouTube?
Are those beeps coming from the
I can't see.
telephone system? Okay.
But why would more beeps be happening if everybody was already online? They got dropped, they came back, or maybe Dr. Sanders called in, or
Yeah, I know Councilman Guard was trying to call in earlier and was having a hard time maintaining signals. So again, we're in recess for 2 or 3 more minutes here. Still an opportunity to call in and testify on ordinance 1188 or emergency ordinance 1189. And that number again is 253-6202. Can I ask a favor, Tom? Yeah. And
that'll be good.
it kind of dropped off my radar, but I'm going to change the command tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. And it's going to be very restricted this time. Usually it's a big public event with about 150 people in the community and everything invited, but they're gonna have it on board, and they invited me to attend on board on behalf of the city. And I thought it'd be good to recognize this commander in particular because of some of the things he's done during his tenure here was kind of above and beyond the normal great things they do. So Susan put that together, but if we could, I didn't get it. Amend the agenda, yeah, so just a action item after, maybe after 17,
Okay.
and then I can read it into the record.
Okay.
Forgot about that. I'm glad you remembered.
What's that?
I'm glad you remembered about that.
Yeah.
Ask him.
So do you want to have it like 17A?
Sure. Exactly. Okay, we're out of recess for the public hearing, and having no public calling in to testify, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn?
They were all muted.
Okay, got several seconds all at once. That second was,
Guard.
okay, so motion Baylor and Councilman Guard to adjourn the public hearing. Is there any objection? Okay, the public hearing is adjourned. Okay, I'll call the regular city council meeting on June 17th, 2020 to order at 7 p.m. If you could join me in pledging the flag, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Mayor Copeland.
Here.
Tom Baylor.
Here.
Kathy Sherman.
Here.
Jeff Guard.
Here.
Melina Meyer.
Here.
Ann Schaefer.
Here.
David Allison.
Here.
And David Gleason is absent. That's a quorum of council.
Move to approve the regular agenda for June 17th, 2020.
Second.
Have a motion, Baylor, second Sherman.
I'd like to amend the agenda to add a proclamation from the city of Cordova for the proclamation of appreciation to Commander Colin Bronson of the United States Coast Guard. And I'd like to put that under 17A. Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, motion to amend Baylor and second Councilman Guard. Is there any further amendments to the agenda? Okay, is there any objection to approving the agenda as amended? Hearing none, the agenda will stand approved as amended. Does council have any conflicts of interest or ex parte communications to disclose this evening? Okay, hearing none. Communications by and petitions from visitors. We'll start with a update from our incident management team, COVID-19 update. And Mr. Tremblay, do we have Dr. Sanders?
I'm here. This is.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Dr. Sanders, if you'd like to provide an update.
So I am not certain if everybody was able to see the update that's been pushed out rather rapidly this afternoon, but late this afternoon, the medical response team and hospital lab identified a second COVID-19 case in our community. This is an individual that came from out of state to work at Ocean Beauty. They have been on quarantine the entire time that they have been here in Cordova, which has only been a handful of days. Today, in routine screening, the group that this individual is quarantined with was screened. All the rest of the group was negative. We did identify one positive. That positive case is now in isolation, and the contact tracing has been initiated. We are setting a confirmatory, shouldn't say confirmatory because the test that we have here is very good, but we still are adding a second test to go to the state in the morning. We feel really good about the screening processes. This is the second time we've identified a case early and during the quarantine process, and we feel like we're going to be able to contain this one again. The one other thing, and I know people may have heard me say this a couple times today, this testing that the community of Cordova has is so robust, it exceeds what other communities have, and that is 100% attributable to the people that are working behind the scenes to make this all go seamlessly for our community. So I just really want to appreciate those people that are working both at Olanka and the hospital to make this process work out for Cordova. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Dr. Sanders. Any questions, Councilman Baylor?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Sanders. So maybe if you could review one more time for us. I know I've asked this before, many others have, but your ideal situation for testing, because recently I've traveled and I did get a negative test before I came back to the state. And then, so what is the optimum? Let's say you travel, if you've got a test or didn't get a test, do you want to come in here and test the next day, the day you get here? Do you want to isolate for a couple of days and then go test? What do you think is optimal for people coming in?
I think for right now, the important thing is to follow the same guidance that the state is giving. The state is saying is that we want a test from anybody that's arriving from out of the state or out of the country to have either been tested 72 hours before they travel or get a test as soon as they arrive in Alaska. They quarantine until they have the results of that test, and then once they have a negative result, they can not be in self-quarantine, but be doing normal activities throughout a community, with the exception of encouraging people to social distance, not go into stores, but utilize curbside services, and try to avoid contact until they have a second negative test that is done after they have been in state for 7 days.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilman Sherman, any questions?
No, thank you.
Councilman Guard?
No, thank you.
Vice Mayor Meyer?
No questions, thank you.
Councilman Schaefer?
No, I don't have any questions, but thank you for the clear information. It's appreciated.
Councilman Ellison?
No questions, thank you.
And Councilman Gleason, did we have you join us? Okay, thank you, Dr. Sanders. If you would like to, I can skip ahead to a report of boards and commissions for CCMC Authority Board, and that'll give a minute for the public to call in for any audience participation. That number again is 253-6202.
Great. So I'm here today as the hospital representative as well, and I think everybody knows this has been a busy time for the hospital. It's been a time that I've really got to come in and look and see some of our hospital processes. I have never questioned the quality of care that we get in here in Cordova. I think it's excellent. We have excellent providers, and they have time, and the nursing staff has time to spend with patients. One of the things that we do know in Cordova is we can really work to build our healthcare system to be a little bit more robust and have some of the other processes certainly improved, and we're seeing a lot of processes that we can work on improving in the hospital, and have been working on that. We've also seen COVID has enabled the NVE and Olanka to work together with CCMC in a really collaborative way, and I think it's an exciting time that we're all working to build healthcare here in Cordova. I do have with me our new CFO, who has joined the hospital just over a month ago. And I would like to give him a minute. He just closed out his first full month here at the hospital on those books, and I'll let him give us a quick update as he's the one that's kind of overseeing our COVID funding and our financial processes. Eric, are you on?
Yes, I'm on, and thank you for the opportunity to kind of give a brief presentation. As Dr. Sanders mentioned, we have had some unique opportunities with the funding that's come in for the COVID response, and we are working on, we now have the first month with all the revenues in. The cash that we have related to COVID funding, we're about $4.9 million with cash assets currently. And of that, we have set aside 2 new accounts for both the CARES Act and the Rural Health Care Act funding. The intent of both of those is to help the facility get be more prepared for any sort of ongoing COVID or respiratory illness needs. And those will show up in this month's financials as unearned revenues because there is a responsibility to capture the costs and report them in a certain manner to keep them from being, recouped or any sort of federal take back. So we've been very cognizant of how we spend the funds. Dr. Sanders has a report. We've spent some time the past 10 days, or 15 days, identifying priorities in the facility to ensure that the quality of care and the infrastructure is there, so if we have an ongoing need for a COVID response, or as we take on other sort of healthcare crises, that we are well positioned for that. So that's kind of the current status of what we're doing financially. We are working to improve the billing systems, the efficiency of those operations, and last Friday had the opportunity to kind of visit with our revenue manager to set forth some metrics as far as the revenue cycle timeliness. And our goal currently is to be within 60 days from date of service or date of discharge to have the claims fully adjudicated through the insurance process. The goal is by August 31st, within 60 days, and that's a big step forward in kind of our transparency to the community and our intent to be a very effective and very cost-efficient partner for the community. So that's what I have. Dr. Sanders, anything you'd like me to add, or any questions from the board?
Thanks. Now, I just want to add that, as you can see, Eric and I are really working on making sure that we remain transparent and we get you guys the information and the community information as is needed and appropriate. And that transparency, I think, is very important for Cordova. I know getting the testing information out to you as well with the COVID process has been important, that we are open to the community. I will add one thing I forgot to say in the earlier presentation. This case will not count in the Cordova number as it did last time. It will count on our dashboard, but in the state metrics, it's going to be recorded on the bottom part where it's a out-of-state case. So, any questions?
Okay, thank you. Before I go through the council question list, I just want to acknowledge we do have a caller on hold, and we'll go to our on-phone lines in just a moment, and I'll take any council questions for the medical team. Vice Mayor Meyer.
No, I don't have any questions at this time. Thank you for the report about the active case and where that shows up. Really appreciate all the work that you guys are doing. Thanks.
Councilman Allison.
No questions. Thank you.
Councilman Baylor.
Yeah, I do have one for Dr. Sanders. I'm kind of thinking about that positive case we have, and you can correct me if I'm wrong or comment, but I think the fact that this person got on a plane and traveled here, and as of now, there's no other cases, it tends to show you that the hand washing, the mask, the social distancing, all those sort of things do work, because even if you have a positive case, if you kind of follow those rules, your chances of getting this virus is greatly reduced. Would you concur with that?
I think a lot of things are happening in the country are showing us that the social distancing and masks and hand hygiene are helping. I am fairly certain this individual was brought in on a charter flight. So that being said, the fact that the cohort that they have been quarantined with for the last 4 days still tested positive is somewhat reassuring, and over the next week, if they continue to be negative, I say positive, I'm sorry, that cohort is negative, and if they continue to be negative over the next week, I will feel even more confident in those processes.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Sherman.
No questions. Thank you very much, and I appreciate the financial update.
Councilman Guard.
Yeah, no questions. Thanks for everything.
Councilman Schaefer.
No questions. Thank you both so much.
Thank you, Dr. Standers and Eric. Appreciate the report. So we'll revert to audience participation and go to the caller online. So caller, you're on air now. If you could state your name for the record and 3 minutes, please.
Good evening, City Council. This is Lisa Dawson calling with the Copper River Watershed Project. I'm calling to speak to agenda item 12 under correspondence to provide an update on culvert work on the Copper River Delta at mile 25. We want to get the word out to share the exciting construction activity to improve fish passage at mile 25 by replacing 3 undersized culverts, as well as to warn people adventuring out the road that they might be facing some delays. There will be flaggers out there during construction. Additionally, there will be 3 12-hour road closures. So people can contact us at the Copper River Watershed Project by calling our number at 424-3334 to be added to our email notification list, and we will send out these road closure notifications 48 hours to 72 hours in advance of the actual road closure. And I just want to take this moment to thank the community for working with us and being understanding during these periods, and how excited we are to this culmination point of this huge construction project that has been partnered with the Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife, NOAA, ADF&G, Department of Transportation, with funding provided by EGOS. So that's all for me. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that update and a reminder on the road closures out the highway. Are there any other? Okay, thank you, Lisa.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So the phone line is open for audience participation, 253-6202. Okay, we'll go ahead and move to chairpersons and representatives of boards and commissions. School board representative. Is there a report from school board? Okay, hearing none. No student council representative report this evening. So the audience comments line again, 253-6202. We don't have any calls at this time, so we'll move to approval of the consent calendar. There's just one item. Does the council wish to remove that for discussion?
If there's no discussion on the minutes, you want to try and add those in so that there's one vote.
Is there any objection to adding the minutes to the consent calendar? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Tom Baylor,
Yes.
Kathy Sherman,
Yes.
Jeff Guard,
Yes.
Melina Meyer,
Yes.
Ann Schaefer,
Yes.
David Allison,
Yes.
and David Glazen is absent. The consent calendar with the minutes is approved.
Okay, and that was, consent calendar was a excused absence for Councilmember Schaefer from the June 3rd regular meeting. And the minutes were the regular public hearing of the June 3rd, 2020 meeting, and the minutes of the June 3rd, 2020 regular council meeting. We have no bids for consideration this evening. Mayor's report. doesn't seem like I captured everything I would have liked to. My participation in the COVID-19 response has settled down a little bit, mostly to participating in a few local, state, and national meetings during the week, mostly fisheries related, including the state industry meeting and our local industry meetings, and then a daily radio update and once a week press briefing. And we hand that back and forth sometimes between myself and City Manager Helen and Dr. Sanders, or J.R. Lewis, who fills in sometimes as well. And he's copied the incident management team daily reports. So I really appreciate, again, the work of our PIOs, PIO Kathy Sherman in particular, for drafting those and keeping us abreast of the news and incident management team activities. And also the incident management team is meeting once weekly now on Wednesday mornings. Getting feedback on several fronts from state and federal agencies and others that come to the community and see firsthand or see our participation that Cordova is still well ahead of the curve and has been timely and effective in our response to the virus. And that's due to a variety of factors, not the least of which is our incident management team. And I think most importantly, a committed and proactive citizenry and our volunteers and ambassadors who are really helping to communicate and provide support resources. And then the city staff, both in their roles as incident management team and city staff. I think the focus we recognize is shifting from public health, where we've largely been successful, including the positive case today, which again was an indication that the process is working. And the focus is really shifting to supporting our business community through a difficult time. And that's been reflected in the special city council meetings and other activities of the city manager and staff. So on the community, on the Cordova community health front, I have met with the city manager, CCMC Authority Board Chair, Tribal Council Chair, the CCMC CEO, and other stakeholders, kind of to provide feedback to City Council on the community health services status and some suggestions for our executive session and open sessions tonight. Also, we have Commissioner of Alaska Department of Fish and Game, Douglas Vincent Lang, has arrived in Cordova this evening. He's going to be here tomorrow flying over the Copper River with our commercials fishery director, Sam Raybung. They're going to be going out and fortunately observing the fleet actually fishing. Just see the area and the community and the importance of seafood processing to not only Cordova, but to the state and to our national economies. So really appreciate them reaching out and visiting the community. And Helen, city manager, and I had a chance to meet with Commercial Fisheries Director Sam Raybung earlier this evening. And then he and the commissioner will be meeting with our organizational leaders at PISWAC, CDFU, the Marketing Association, NB, et cetera, to talk through fisheries issues and opportunities tomorrow after their flight seeing. So Alaska Marine Highway Service, the new Governor's Reform Committee has been meeting, and we've had some participation by Cordova stakeholders and some by myself as well. Seems like they're rehashing some of the same ground. Hopefully we can come up with some different outcomes. Right now we're slated to get the Aurora back in service this fall. It's currently in the shipyard being rebuilt. That's a positive piece. And then again, really appreciate the suggestions and input from former employee Robin Irving and Kathy Renfeld at Chamber of Commerce and the communities. We provide feedback to try to encourage the best that we can possibly get out of the few scheduled sailings that we have starting in July. And that's about all I had for right now, except to just get to the other item later on the agenda that Councilman Baylor added. Is there any questions? Hearing none, city manager's report.
I want to share with everyone that next week we will really focus in on our CARES Act funding that we've received and try to identify specifically how we're going to spend those resources. And for council, we will have a lot of information to share with you to help you make your decisions on how to proceed with that. Did want to alert the community that there are still fund sources available for small businesses. There's a $280 million relief fund for small businesses. There's some concern, and I think the legislature is going to address the limitations that are on those funds for businesses that don't meet the criteria. They're looking to expand that. There's a fund specifically available for nonprofits through the Alaska Community Foundation. They have over $40 million available for the nonprofit community. And the Rasmussen Foundation and the Alaska Municipal League have joined forces, and there's going to be a nonprofit arts fund available as well. So as this emergency proceeds, there's more and more resources that are being brought to bear to help everyone recover or at least survive. With the CARES funding that the council will be looking at next week, we'll be able to complete a picture here in Cordova for our recovery. In front of you is a finance report from Ken Fay. If anyone has any questions, he's here to answer questions. I think that's it for me.
Did you want to have that report now or take questions? Or
Yeah, if we want to do the finance report, Ken can address that. And if anyone has any questions, he's here. Yeah.
Hello. Hello. I just want to apologize because it says that the investment policy will be included, and it wasn't. I apologize for that. But the results are as of May, and I'm still getting an understanding of what is good and what is bad. It's generally, actually, that's not true. Most of the revenue shows up in the summer, so the revenue numbers are sort of as expected. Let's see, the UBS balances are investment. I had a good conversation with our investment advisor and to go over exactly benchmarks and what the investment policy was. And we are continuing on that path to see exactly if we're getting value from the fees that they're charging. I guess that's about it. Any questions, clarifications?
I mean, just ask if there's, just ask openly if there's any questions from council.
I do, if you want to go to the phone.
Any questions from council on the phone? Okay, Councilman Baylor.
Yeah, on the UBS, I've been kind of pushing for that. I think anytime you've been with a firm for 10 years or longer and you haven't had any comparisons or gone out for an RFP, I think it's due for that. And sounds like you've got a little knowledge in that. Maybe down the road we can look into that, do some comparisons to see if we are getting a good deal or not, or if we should be switching. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but we don't have to do it next month, but we should be looking at doing this, I think.
Oh, yes, I agree. And part of the problem, or not problem, but a lot of times organizations shoot for a number, and like whether it be 4% or 6% or 10%, but the market is what the market is, and so to try to beat the market is very, very difficult. So sort of what I've seen in my experience is you go for indexes. You try to choose the index, and whatever the index is, because that's the benchmark, and why not buy the benchmark? But in terms of looking at the present investment advisor, definitely I'm well on that.
Okay, good. And then some comments for the manager. I think earlier you maybe can address it. I think we're going to have a meeting on some of the CARES Act spending, but The rest of the hand washing sinks got put in at the harbor on the lower ends of the ramps. Materials finally showed up, but while doing that, we did identify the fish cleaning stations, and I think those could be converted into more of a permanent hand washing and really get an update and get the right plumbing. And I think that could be carefully worded to be fall under that CARES money. Doug Pettit of Copper Highway Heating was doing the plumbing, and he had some great ideas, and I think it could be done in such a manner that if we ever do a remodel on that harbor, it could be repurposed if we use the right stuff. So I would encourage you maybe even to contact him with his thoughts. The other thing I thought about with the CARES is the ventilation for this city hall. That's going to be a big issue with bars, restaurants, and other areas, is the proper ventilation because of the COVID thing. And actually, I'm sitting here in this hall here, and it's pretty warm, so I don't think we're getting the proper ventilation here even. And speaking of the CARES too, maybe you can put this on your list, that I was thinking the 911 or the addressing, I think a case could be made very easy by our first responders that contact tracing and getting the people that have the virus is hard because we don't have correct addressing. So maybe we could roll that in. I think we need to be a little creative in our writing, but I think we could do some of these things. So that was just some of my thoughts, and it sounds like we'll be talking about some more, but I wanted to throw those out to you. Thanks.
Any other questions for City Manager, Finance Director through the City Manager? Okay, hearing none. Clerk's report.
I've provided a written report with just a few highlights of what we've been working on, but I also wanted to mention that Dr. Sanders was mentioning more transparency over at CCMC, and I just heard from Faith today, and the elected and appointed officials lists in the back, they've given all these CCMC board members CCMC email addresses, so next council packet, those will be updated, which is helpful for citizens, I think, to have their email addresses. And then that whole thing with me adding the minutes into the consent calendar years ago, I always used to put them there. And then they'd always wind up being pulled because somebody had a comment or a typo or something to say about minutes. So I stopped doing it. And now, of course, in years, nobody said anything about the minutes. So I may try to put those back in and see how it goes and pull them instead. It just seems smoother and one less vote, especially when we're on the phone. So I will try that. And I'm also working on trying to do an elections ordinance change myself, but of course I will have to talk to the attorney a little bit just to possibly make mail elections easier. So not necessarily going to strictly mail, but just having more people having that opportunity. And so I have a few things to work on, but if we need a work session soon, and maybe a half an hour of it could be devoted to that before I write the final ordinance, just so that I get everybody's sense of what you guys would support before I did it. So we can talk at pending agenda.
Okay, that's great, because I think the manager might have a suggestion for a special meeting that we can take up then as well. I guess for my part, I just want to thank you, Susan. It's another one of those kind of unsung positions during a pandemic like this. Not only the extra workload just with the meetings, but also the code research, the legal engagement, the support for the city manager and staff, and it's one of those times when having a real capable and a committed clerk really makes a difference, and it's definitely been an important role over the last few months, so thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, I would, if you don't mind, I would echo those comments too. I've been real happy getting notices and text, and I've been kept up to date, and it's difficult with not being able to be here, so thank you also.
You bet.
Yeah, the communications platform's also been its own challenge, so council, questions for the city clerk? Okay, hearing none. Thank you. So we have correspondence as noted in the packet, a letter from Athered regarding childcare funding, a Copper River Watershed Project email regarding the culvert project that was discussed earlier in audience comments, then AHFC housing relief notice, And for the public's benefit, this information, this correspondence that goes to council is often beneficial to the community, and that's a great program if you're struggling with your rent or your home mortgage due to COVID-related financial impacts. Is there any questions or comments by council on the correspondence? Maybe I will go through the list on this one. Councilman Schaefer.
Sorry, I need a minute to get my mute off. No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Sherman.
No questions, thank you.
Councilman Baylor.
No questions.
Councilman Meyer.
No questions, but just maybe a comment about the child care funding. I don't know if our CARES money allows us to do something, but that might be worth looking into a little bit. I thought it was interesting.
Thank you. Councilman Allison.
No comment, thank you.
Councilman Guard.
No comment this time, thank you.
And just in case he was able to call in, Councilman Gleason. Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Baylor.
I move ordinance 1188, an ordinance of the Council of City of Cordova, Alaska, amending Cordova Municipal Code Section 5.40.030 to upgrade language regarding sales tax exemptions and adding CCMC 5.0.025 to identify classes of buyers exempt from city sales tax and exempt sales, services, and rentals to federally recognized tribal entities from the city sales tax. It's the second reading.
Second.
I heard Councilman Guard with a second. I think there was two. Councilman Baylor, would like to speak to your motion.
No, I'll support it. We discussed this before, so I'm good.
Councilman Guard, to your second.
No, I'll support it. It's just good housekeeping.
Discussion, Councilman Allison.
Will I support it? Thank you.
Sherman.
I'm in support, thank you.
Meyer.
I'm also in support. Thank you.
Schaefer.
Yep, I'll be supporting this, thank you.
Okay, sounds like council's ready to vote. Roll call, please.
Ann Schaefer,
Yes.
Kathy Sherman,
Yes.
Tom Baylor,
Yes.
Melina Meyer,
Yes.
David Allison,
Yes.
Jeff Guard,
Yes.
and David Gleason is absent. Motion carries 6-0.
Okay. Next item is emergency ordinance 1189, an emergency ordinance of the Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, adopting the City of Cordova COVID-19 recovery plan and ratifying emergency order 2020-09.
I move to approve?
I'll second.
Have a motion, Schaefer, and second Guard. Would you like to speak to your motion, Councilman Schaefer?
Yeah, actually, could the city manager just summarize what this changes for us from our current trajectory and current plan?
Sure. I know, I think we were quite convinced that there would be no more changes. This isn't really a change. What this is an acknowledgement that we agreed as council to bring city in line with the state of Alaska. They have in place a red, yellow, green coding system that basically says under certain situations will be in red, which means the highest alert, up to green light, go. We agreed to adopt that, but what we didn't have in place, and this emergency order seeks to put in place a provision that if for some reason we have to deviate from the state's system because we have our own outbreak, we needed to have a legal mechanism to do so. So I have Holly online, and I want her to talk a little bit about this, because I will say that two things have happened. This came out after our incident command team met a week ago Wednesday, in part because due to the big outbreak in Whittier, where they discovered that they didn't have the right legal framework in place to go off the state's plan, that we were in the same boat. And so Holly and I talked and decided to put this forward. It didn't go through incident command, and there was some questions that were raised. I was going to pull this from the agenda for a future agenda, but Holly did have an opportunity to talk to incident command this morning, and I would like her to speak to those issues so that you guys have some comfort about where this is. Again, we can delay the vote, but Holly is online, and this was in your packet, so we decided to proceed and at least provide the information, and we'll let you decide about what action to take. So Holly, I'll let you go forward.
Great. So, I mean, one thing I will say is the emergency operations team is looking at changes to this document to help hopefully clarify. One of the things that, hello?
Yes, we hear you well, Holly.
You can't hear me?
We can hear you. We hear you well.
Oh, good. Okay, good. One of the changes that they were looking at is the state has adopted a color code signal approach with red, yellow, and green. And they've also adopted a metric analysis that looks at 4 areas. And I'm sure you guys saw that in the plan. It kind of walks through trends and forecasts regarding COVID-19. It looks at the disease itself, testing capabilities, healthcare and medical care capacities. And it does that at a statewide level. And so that is what their medical team is using in order to navigate between more or less social distancing. Currently, the state considers us in a green zone. And when we looked at what was ahead for the city, we realized we have this moment to take a breath. Hopefully, that stays the case indefinitely, but we don't want to fail to plan in a way now that will make things easier for the public to understand and easier for everyone to navigate later. And one of the things that we're seeing is case precedent now coming down regarding states opening rules and regulations on both a local but mostly a state level, right? So the Wisconsin Supreme Court, for example, weighed in and said, this is different than a lot of the emergencies we face, and we want to see involvement by all branches of the government. In that case, they were looking at the chief medical officer's hunker down order. And we want to see that the public has process because we have these constitutional provisions to ensure there is no corruption, that civil liberties are not violated, and that the rights of individuals are protected. It's not that they were saying that hunker down orders or restrictions are unconstitutional, but they wanted to see more involvement from everyone. And I think when you look at Japan and you look at the policy group, one of the things Helen really wanted to do use this as a chance, and the emergency operations team as well, right? They want to see council lead the charge and really engage in discussing the community. What happens if we do have a community outbreak? What happens if we have to deviate from state because metrics, when they're applied in Cordova, just don't line up anymore? The purpose of the plan was to adopt the state system, its code signaling and its metric system, but to add what I would call that trigger, that local, we are in it, we've got 50 cases all of a sudden, we've got to react now. We don't have time to wait for our situation to filter into the state's metrics. And given the size of Cordova, there's no guarantee that even if you took numbers that would feel astronomical and have a huge impact on Cordova, that it would really change the health, like the bed capacity example on the statewide. So that is the concept behind a local orange alert. It was, we're adopting the state's metrics, but we're tailoring them, and the medical team, Dr. Sanders, worked with the city administration to make sure that the alarms go off at a time that makes sense on a local level. For example, the state they're looking at 1 case per 1,000 people. Obviously, that's not a metric that would be applied in Cordova. So once the state goes through it, once the emergency operations team led by the medical team with metrics, if it was wow, we've got a problem. Oh, I'm sorry, is someone talking?
No, we just have you. You're cutting out just a tiny bit there, Holly, but we just have you on the line. We hear you.
Okay. I apologize for the bad connection. It's pretty windy here. So the goal was to create a situation create a recovery plan that gave options and gave the public involvement on the front end, gave the council the ability to really weigh in on what those rules would look like with insight from the medical team, emergency operations, and other partners with the city, so that and I'll just say local orange for now because that is something the emergency operations team is looking at revisiting, but if a local orange alert was triggered, over time everybody would know exactly what that meant. So hopefully we never go there, but if we did have to go there, it would be ready, it would be there, and it would have that comprehensive involvement by everyone in Cordova. One of the things the emergency operations team is looking at, though, is for right now, for example, we look at the state, they're in green. But are they really in green? Because we still have testing at the airport, right? We still have protocols. We still have Health Mandate 10, which applies to our officers. And we have a lot of things in place we didn't have 4 months ago. And so I think on a local level, they're worried that using a color-coded system, we may get confused that if we're following the state, but there's still movement amongst various rules. So they're looking at a level 1, 2, 3, 4 to trigger that, or even removing the color coding. So I think that's one of the reasons why the city manager was thinking about pulling the plan, or at least slowing down the discussions. Does anybody have any questions? That was a lot of information, I know.
This is Councilmember Schaefer, Ann.
Yes, it was
Can I have a question?
Yes, it was your question, Councilman Schaefer. Did that answer it?
No, can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
Or I can wait also.
No, you made the motion.
Sure.
Go ahead.
So as a home rule city and under our current emergency declaration, don't we already have the authority to increase restrictions in our community further than what the state provides? So currently we have a mask mandate in Cordova, which the state doesn't have. So don't we already have the capacity to roll back our opening?
No, it's a good question. The answer is we don't really know where our authorities lie and don't lie because this is a completely new ballgame, right? What we can do is look to the law and get the best interpretation we can. And for example, so when you do a facial covering rule, what you're doing is definitely impeding someone's civil liberties in a sense. And that's why you guys took that step via ordinance. You had hearings. You involved the public. When you issue a hunker down order, which we have never done in Cordova, in a way that had the effect of shutting down businesses that might be open, that went so far as to have that level of interference, if you will, with this sort of economic livelihood and movements of your public. When you do something like that, the question a court would ask is, what kind of process did you follow? What was your reason for doing it? Was it reasonable? Did you stay close to it? And then they're going to look at, did you violate a right to privacy or substantive or procedural due process rights under the Constitution? In addition to, are you acting within your authority that's granted under state law? I feel very confident we are acting under our authority granted under state law. It's the constitutional piece that we're really watching. Those types of actions are significant, and so we want to provide as much process as possible. And we have the ability. We know what COVID is now. We see it there. We know how to fight it to the extent that we can. We know it's social distancing. We know it's facial coverings and testing. So if we do not put a system in place now that affords process and involvement by the public and the council, then we are more vulnerable to challenge. Now that said, I'll take a breath right there though, see if, does that start to answer your question?
Yeah, I think I understand. Thank you.
So one of the things I want to make clear though is it's really important to look at an emergency like this as almost a two-pronged emergency. COVID-19 has created a state of emergency that we are in now, and we are reacting to that, and yet there's not an active case in Cordova at this time, as far as we know. And so while it's an emergency because it has economic impacts and very real impacts in many ways on the community, it is not a tsunami-like or earthquake-like emergency. And but it certainly can become one. It has become one in other jurisdictions, in New York City, for example. And when that happens, we still have the emergency operations team, that plan, our rulemaking authority under that emergency operations function. But that's different than as a matter of policy, as a matter of what are we going to do if we have an outbreak. The decision-making and who's making the decisions and if they're making them unilaterally, those are different analyses. So you don't give up the ability to react when it becomes a COVID tsunami. This is just putting in place a recovery plan that deals with some of the policy issues that may be issues we're dealing with for the rest of the year into fall and maybe longer.
Does that answer, Councilman Schaefer?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Councilman Guard, to your second.
Even though we may or may not have the ability to step away from the state stuff under home rule, we've still got the 10-day grace period to step away from the state stuff for 10 days. So we do have a window here. If something all fell down tomorrow, there are 50 cases tomorrow morning at Ocean Beauty or down in the harbor. We can still do this, and we've got 10 days to get this ordinance adopted in, right?
Well, yes and no. I mean, you absolutely do have that right now. And one of the things the recovery plan it does, though, is it would amend your rules to remove basically, except for some mutual aid agreements and notice provisions, you really just be following the state's lead. And the only time you would really deviate from the state's lead is if the analysis using the metrics that are lined out in your recovery plan require you to. And that could still mean that the emergency operations team does the analysis and recommends or puts forward a rule that is a lesser restriction than, say, the outbreak rules. But as far as, and this is in part because we're open, the idea that the state only has a few other things to remove. Right? Maybe they remove the testing requirement for travel and some of the requirements they've placed on some of the industries. But there's really nothing left to open. So as it stands now, the state becomes more restrictive, Cordova follows. But you have your 10-day hold. Under the recovery plan, Cordova would just follow, period. And it's only in a case where it's deemed necessary that they would conduct their metric analysis and say, uh-oh, call a council meeting, and council would and make a declaration that the community outbreak rules are going into play. And council would then have 5 days to approve or repeal that.
Does that answer, Councilman Gard?
I think so. I think we're giving up the right to the 10-day rule is what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, that is, and after I talk to you about this, I really hope you take over it, because a lot of the stuff is for you to decide. We have that time, we have that breath, so let's take it. You are the experts in the sense that you were elected to lead your community, so you know, you're weighing what's important and and how to protect your community and also their economic needs. So it's, I know it's a lot, and to put on you as a body, but it really is the right place for that to be at this point where we are now. We have that time, and I know it's a big responsibility. So basically, if you want it there, it's there. If you don't want it there, we can take it back. This is the time to have those hard conversations.
Okay, discussion, Councilman Baylor?
Yeah, I view this as a solution looking for a problem. By no means is this needed. I would remind the counselor there that it wasn't that long ago that the governor on TV said any community that needs to be more restrictive in their rules can, as long as it's science or health-based. Well, clearly, if we have an emergency outbreak here, that's science and health-based, and we have the ability to do whatever we need to do. And we have that ability under the green, the yellow, and the red. So why do we want to confuse the public? Why do we want to confuse people coming to this community? Why do we want to take this extra step? I don't support this at all. I don't see any reason that we would have to go down this road. And to talk about a case in Wisconsin, this is Cordova, homeroom city. And again, the governor specifically said, if you need to go more restrictive, you can, as long as it's science or health-based.
Those are all fair. Those are really helpful comments. I mean, one thing I would just remind you is whether or not the governor does not determine constitutionality. So we certainly want to ask the governor about constitutionality if we're afraid we're getting sideways with the Constitution, because the state is our ally. It is, we are a political subdivision of the state, and we want to work collaboratively and as a team, and Cordova's done an amazing job doing that. But it is, whether or not authority exists or doesn't exist, the governor, knowing that the governor is saying we can make local decisions, that is very comforting and it's good, but it doesn't eliminate the fact that when we make decisions to restrict people's right to earn an income, run their business, control their bodies and what they put on it, that we have to be aware that there is a constitution and that Alaska interprets its constitution very strictly, and if we have an opportunity to afford involvement and notice, then that's something, by taking that opportunity, we make our laws and rules less vulnerable to challenge. And, and I think we involve the public, which is always a good thing to do. You want their voices, right?
Well, I would comment to my fellow councilman. If something like this happened, if we had an outbreak, the shopkeepers, the owners, you probably won't have to tell anybody to shut down. This town will get so tight very quickly. Everybody's in their own business, their own health. I just see this as a total non-issue, so I will not support it. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Meyer?
Yeah, just a lot of the questions that I initially had, the manager kind of brought up, like, has it been ran by our incident command team and our medical team, and what their thoughts are on it. And it sounds like there's some hesitation to move it on from them, or they have some issues that haven't been addressed yet. So I would like to see this either referred back to staff, or I'm not really ready to vote in favor of it in this time. Those are my thoughts on it.
Okay, and correct me if I'm wrong, Holly, but we did have a public hearing on this item, and council is debating it, making a decision on whether or not to implement it. So they are having that visible and participatory process, right?
Absolutely. And I would say, I think that, and your city manager can correct me if I'm wrong, but my feeling is this is a great process because it gets council talking about it. But I do think that the emergency operations team, along with the city manager, that they do want to spend a little more time with it and see, in light of where the state is now, if there's some changes to make it simpler or to change the coding system in a way that is clearer for the public. So I wouldn't say that. I would recommend you postpone it as well, I guess is what I'm saying, because I think their input is really important. And while they've really looked at those metrics, there's other pieces that there are some really good ideas from various members of the emergency operations team and the incident commander that are a little bit different than what's in there that I think council may want to consider.
Okay, discussion, Councilman Ellison?
Yeah, I got mixed emotions about this ordinance. The first sentence in the request for issues got me going. Start with anytime the city attorney has created comprehensive recovery plan, it gets a little queasy anytime the attorney gets involved, especially when they're proposing it. But I like you, Holly, but I don't like your profession, but everybody's got to do something, and it takes everybody to make the world go round, so don't take anything personal there. That said, I've always been against Rule 17, and this does take that away. But I agree with Councilmember Baylor that this really isn't doing anything more than stating again that we're aligned with the state, with the exception of the few rules that are more restrictive than the state. And are you guys still there? Yeah. And because our manager or the council has the ability to mandate at any given time, it doesn't give us any more authority, I guess, other than what the attorney has said regarding more deliberation on it. So I guess in the end, I would support this because it gets rid of Rule 17 and aligns us closer to the state. And I think as soon as we can get aligned all the way with the state, then the better off we're going to be. And I've given that sermon a couple of times over the past month or two. But sounds like everybody's requesting that it be referred back to staff. So after everybody has a chance to speak on it once, and I think that motion will be forthcoming. But I'd like to give everybody an opportunity to speak once on the entire ordinance before we do that.
And Councilman Sherman.
Sure thing. So I'm kind of sad. I wish this had been removed from the agenda in the first place because I know Unified Command spoke out against it going forward. I think we need to be consistent with our past actions. We've held up things before using Rule 17 and asked for review and recommendations from Unified Command and the medical team. I'd like to see the same process happen with this. Them review it, provide us with recommendations, bring it back to us at a special meeting if necessary. And Mr. Allison, I am not in support of removing Rule 17. I'm not in support of adding another confusing color as a PIO. That's just going to confuse the public. I mean, yellow works, yellow's fine. And I feel like what we have in place has been and proven effective to date. And the system's not broke, so why are we trying to fix it and make it even more confusing? So I'm not in favor of this going forward at all without Unified Command and the medical team giving us a recommendation. Thanks.
Is that a motion to refer, Councilman Sherman?
Why, certainly, I will make that motion.
Second.
Second, Baylor. Would you like to speak to the motion to refer beyond what you've already have?
No, I don't have any more reasons than what I just explained.
Councilman Baylor, to your second.
I'm good.
Discussion on motion to refer, Vice Mayor Meyer.
No, I think referring it is a good way to go about it. I agree with what Kathy said.
Guard.
No, I'm in favor of referring it back to staff.
Allison.
Yeah, I just want to point out if we can refer, then it certainly wasn't an emergency to begin with. So I support referring.
Okay. Schaefer.
I also support referring. I'd like to get the input from the management team.
Okay. It sounds like council's ready to vote on this one. Roll call.
On the motion to refer ordinance 1189, Melina Meyer,
Yes.
David Allison,
Yes.
Tom Baylor,
Yes.
Kathy Sherman,
Yes.
David Gleason is absent, Jeff Guard,
Yes.
Ann Schaefer.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Okay, next item is Resolution 06-20-28, and that's a resolution of the Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, adopting the 2020 land disposal maps.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and second. Baylor, Guard, would you like to speak to your motion?
I'll yield.
Councilman Guard, to your second.
It's our annual event for approval. It's housekeeping, let's get her done.
Discussion, Schaefer.
No, I don't have any comment on this.
Allison.
Yeah, I'll go along with the Planning Commission's recommendation, but I would like to point out in my discussions previously, for the right proposal, everything's available, in my opinion.
Okay. Sherman.
No, I agree with what Planning Commission has recommended.
And Vice Mayor Meyer.
Yeah, same. I agree with what the Planning Commission has approved here. I would maybe just like to say also for the record too that are not available properties, like Councilmember Allison said, is actually available. I think all the last two recent properties, or a number of them since I've been on council, have become requests from unavailable property that have been made available. So while I understand that term there, because it's sometimes really hard property, and it takes the right person, it's a little confusing to the public to know that you can submit to make unavailable property available. So just want to kind of take note of that, because it's a little sticking point that kind of has always bothered me a little bit, but I don't know a good solution for it. But and it's kind of how it's been done lately. But that's all.
Okay. It sounds like council's ready to vote on this one.
No, I'll go one.
Oh, Councilman Baylor.
Yeah, and I guess, I see the planners here, so I did have a thought on the not available property. I'm wondering if I don't know if they've done this, I quickly looked through it, didn't see it, but could it be possible with these maps is to put in there why they're not available? For instance, on the south or the north fill, I mean, obviously we're using it for X, Y, and Z, you know, would that help future council and future plan and zonings to get input, like from the Harbor Commission? What are they using those lots for? Why are they not available? Just kind of throwing that out there, maybe a discussion with your committee on that. I think that would be helpful. And then it would be helpful for future councils too, when something like the request comes like this, is why was it deemed not available? So, just a thought. Okay.
Yeah.
Not a request, just a thought.
Okay, yeah. No,
I think it would be
always looking
helpful.
at ways of improving these, so certainly, yeah, I will look
And
into that.
And that would give, like the Harbor Commission, we've heard from before, you know, well, we weren't notified. That would give them an opportunity to put something in writing that you would have, and then if it ever came up to debate, you know, you could again go back to the Harbor Commission or other properties, parks, recs, everything. Okay, it was just a suggestion.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Further discussion on that item, council? And I'll just mention as well, for those of you who aren't in the room, we do have the city planner here in the audience, and the IT staff manning the public phones, and that's all we have in the audience. So,
Call for the question.
roll call, please.
David Allison,
Yeah.
Kathy Sherman,
Yes.
Melina Meyer,
Yes.
Tom Baylor,
Yes.
Jeff Guard,
Yes.
Ann Schaefer,
Yes.
and David Gleason is absent. Motion carries 6-0.
Okay, and the next item, council, I put on the agenda after some feedback from city council last meeting, and then in checking with the native village of EAC. But this item is, so I put it on, just want to know, council, I put it on the agenda, and I could speak to it if you desire. Resolution 06-20-29, which is a resolution of the Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, opposing a request for emergency special action to allow federal subsistence fish harvest in the lower Copper River using dip net and rod and reel.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion.
I'm sorry, I'll yield
Baylor?
to the mayor for
Okay.
explanation.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, that second was Sherman? Okay, thank you. So basically what concerned me most, council, was that there wasn't a consultation, and this is a fairly sweeping modification with pretty deep impacts. And I was concerned that the city really as a government hadn't been consulted. And it is, to my understanding, to the point that the local district ranger can actually start setting seasons and stuff based on actions so far. And there's still an opportunity to comment on our part, though. And so I reached out to the tribe, to Chairman Olson, and they also had not, well, they actually opposed this measure and have voted that way a couple of times. So that's why I put this on the agenda for council's consideration. So discussion, Councilman Baylor.
I would oppose it.
To your second, Councilman Sherman.
Yes, I would stand stand with the Native Village Tribal Council in this proposition.
Councilman Gard?
Yeah, I'd support the resolution.
Councilman Schaefer?
I'll also support the resolution and stand with the tribal council on this one.
Councilman Gleason actually,
Well, she said she would support the tribal. I'm not sure she understood their position.
okay, yeah. So the tribal council opposed this subsistence, and this resolution also opposes.
So she said it correct.
Yeah.
That's what yeah,
Okay.
Sorry.
agreed.
Okay, thank you. And then Councilman Allison, discussion.
No discussion. I stand with the resolution and the village. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Meyer?
Yeah, I too agree with everything that has been said. I did want to just kind of acknowledge, I understand the access to subsistence fishery and why this proposal went forward. While I don't support this subsistence proposal for subsistence on the lower copper, I do understand the limitations of subsistence to people specifically that do not have access to vote, and that is really difficult. I do see that there is a problem in our community for access to large subsistence fishing, and I think that is something that needs to be addressed. I don't think opening up the lower Copper River for this is the right way to go about it. I think there's some other ideas out there, but I do recognize that access is difficult for many community members.
Further discussion, council? Hearing none, roll call vote.
David Gleason is absent. Tom Baylor?
No.
Melina Meyer?
Wait, a little clarification. Are we voting, the resolution is opposing it, so we're voting yes on the resolution to oppose it. Is that
Correct.
correct?
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Okay, Councilman Baylor is reconsidering his vote.
Yeah.
Do you want
I'm
to
sorry,
do
I was
yes?
misunderstanding. So the resolution is to oppose it?
Correct.
Okay, I'm sorry. I am in favor, yes.
Okay. Melina Meyer?
Yes.
Jeff Gard?
Yes, I'm in support of the resolution.
David Allison?
Yes.
Ann Schaefer?
Yes.
And Kathy Sherman?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Okay, next item is 17A, amended onto the agenda, and that is City of Cordova, Alaska proclamation of appreciation to Commander Colin R. Bronson, United States Coast Guard.
You need a motion on that or something?
Please.
Yes,
yes.
please.
Yeah, I move to adopt their
Perfect.
The
proclamation.
proclamation.
Mrs. Sherman will second.
Okay, motion Baylor, Councilman Sherman, and I apologize, Council, I know you haven't had a chance to read this fully, so I'll read this.
The public hasn't. Sorry.
And the public hasn't, so I'm going to read this into the record for council discussion and consideration, and that discussion can also cover some items that I may have missed. So the City of Cordova, Alaska proclamation. This is a proclamation of appreciation to Commander Colin R. Bronson, United States Coast Guard. I, Mayor Clay Copeland, do hereby issue this proclamation of appreciation to Commander Colin Bronson for his service and valuable contributions to the City of Cordova. Whereas Commander Bronson took command of the U.S. Coast Guard buoy tender Sycamore in Cordova on June 1st, 2017. And whereas Commander Bronson in February of 2019 led the 225-foot Sycamore, which has been stationed in Cordova since 2002, away from our shores for the last time, through the Panama Canal, then north to Baltimore, Maryland. And whereas later in 2019, Commander Bronson and his crew returned to Cordova after a 5-week voyage from Baltimore. aboard the currently Cordova home-ported U.S. Coast Guard cutter Fur. And whereas Commander Bronson served the community distinctively while stationed in Cordova, integral in the construction of the Cordova Disc Golf Course and formation of the Cordova Disc Golf Club, and as an active board member for the Cordova Chamber of Commerce. And whereas Commander Bronson's nomination letter resulted in Cordova's recognition in 2019 as a U.S. Coast Guard city, an accolade which greatly honored Cordovans as a source of great pride. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the mayor, the city council members, the city staff, and the citizens of Cordova do hereby express their sincere appreciation to Commander Colin Bronson for his exemplary service to our community and nation, and wish he and his family every success in the future. Signed this 17th day of June, 2020. Discussion, Councilman Baylor.
No, on the behalf of City Cordova and Council, I would also thank you and your family and all of those who serve us here in Cordova and the Coast Guard and other branches. Thank you.
Councilman Guard, to your second. I'm sorry, Councilman Sherman, to your second.
It's okay. That was lovely. Thank you. And Coast Guard is family, and it's always hard when they have to leave. So thanks.
Councilman Allison.
Yes, appreciate everything they do, and thank them for the service. Thank you.
Councilman Guard.
I think those before me have said it well. I thank them for all the service to the community and the nation and the state, and we wish them well here and beyond.
Councilman Schaefer.
I'll just echo the comments of my my council members. Thank you very much, and good luck.
Councilman Gleason is absent. I just mentioned to council before the vote too that unfortunately, due to pandemic and protocols by the Coast Guard and city, normally this would be a very public event, but unfortunately they won't be able to execute it that way this year. So I have been invited to the changing of the command tomorrow morning on board, and I will attend on behalf of the city, and also wish Commander Bronson well as he disembarks tomorrow afternoon. And also, we have been trying to schedule a celebration event for the U.S. Coast Guard City Declaration. I'll discuss that with Admiral Bell tomorrow morning, but that was interrupted first by a blizzard and then by the pandemic, but we still plan to host that live in-person event here in Cordova later this year. Any further discussion, council?
Yeah, that other paragraph that the Disc Club asked you to read.
Oh, yes. I do not have it in front of me.
All right, let me try and find it. Maybe we can do it at the end.
The Cordova Disc Club, I may circle back to this in audience comments and look for it, but the Cordova Disc Club also, for the public record, wanted to extend their particular appreciation to Commander Bronson for being instrumental in executing that Cordova Disc Club course for Cordova. And it's turned out to be a fantastic thing for Cordova during the pandemic because it's an outdoor sport that you can distance with. So it's gotten quite a bit of use so far this year already. And that statement was, on behalf of the president, or as the president of the Cordova Disc Golf Club, the members and myself personally would like to extend our deepest gratitude to Commander Colin Bronson for his instrumental and paramount role in its creation. Through his vision and aptitude, he shall leave the Cordova a lasting recreation opportunity at the Meals Reservoir Disc Golf Course. We're sad to see him go, but we pledge to keep and stay the course for all players and his, hopefully, eventual return. Remember to always keep your disc wet. Thank you very much. Micah Renfelt, President, Cordova Disc Golf Club. Any further discussion, council? Roll call vote, please.
Kathy Sherman,
Yes.
Ann Schaefer,
Yes.
Jeff Guard,
Yes.
Melina Meyer,
Yes.
David Allison,
Yes.
David Gleason is absent, and Tom Baylor.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Okay, is there any unfinished business? We don't have any on the agenda. So under new and miscellaneous business, pending agenda, calendar and elected and appointed officials lists. And under pending agenda, I think there was a suggestion by the clerk to maybe discuss voting and what that might look like in a special meeting. Also, in discussing with City Manager Helen earlier today, perhaps a special meeting to discuss the CARES Act funding items. There's a little touch on that today. And then also, if the staff is ready, the incident management team has time to review and his staff is ready, that special agenda might or might not include the referred ordinance 1189 on the recovery plan. And so how does next Wednesday look for that special meeting? That's kind of the date that City Manager and I looked at.
And were we thinking noon?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, looking at a noon special meeting next week.
It's good for me.
Me too.
Me three.
Okay, so noon on the 24th sounds like a go. And even though, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I would say this is Councilwoman Schaefer, but I'm going to be out of town for work. But if that works for everyone else, I think that's great.
Would the evening work better or no? Either way, you're out.
No, I'll be gone for a week and a half, 2 weeks. So
Okay.
I think we should go ahead with it.
Okay, so I was thinking that even though the item I was talking about, the election ordinance, might take a little bit of time, but it would be more of a discussion, just so that I could pinpoint what to do. And then the CARES Act funding, I don't think we need action either, but we'd still do it as a special meeting because in case something else with action needs to get on there.
Okay, you just jumped out ahead of what I was thinking. Should we do a work session? But a special meeting might be good because it would leave room for an action item. And then I don't know if Holly is still online or monitoring, but I did want to circle back and mention we did have an active case in Cordova today from earlier, so I just mentioned that for your benefit. So if there's no objection to basically informational items, discussions, more kind of workshop style probably, but and then potentially ordinance 1189 back from staff. And then we'll just follow, if there's no objection, just follow the council's special meeting agenda since these are all directly they're all directly pandemic related. So we could just use that special meeting format that we have where we have an incident management team briefing and then those pandemic related action items, if that works for council. And if not, just voice an objection and then, or suggestion, and then are there any other pending agenda items?
I do not have anything else.
Okay, as we go to audience participation, that telephone number again is 253-6202. Okay, caller, you're on. If you could state your name for the record and 3 minutes, please.
Thank you. This is Barb Jewell, mile 2.2 Whiteside Road. I wanted to start by saying thank you for the thoughtful discussion about the COVID-19 planning and the ways forward, in addition to making sure that you're still taking care of the day-to-day business of the city. So I'm very grateful for all your efforts. I want to speak to the issue of transparency and encourage the council to continue to work towards transparency in its activities. I was sad to see that there's an issue discussing the hospital under an executive session because the sale of the hospital is not an unknown public piece of information, and it continues to be discussed behind closed doors as opposed to in public. Additionally, the finances of the hospital, although they were shared with the council, there's no possibility for the public to comment on that, even though the council and the manager and the mayor have made great efforts to ensure that the public have opportunities to call in and comment on these meetings. Again, I want to urge you to look for ways to be transparent, even though you're having to conduct business remotely and over YouTube. And I, again, thank you for all your hard work in making sure that the business of the city continues. Thank you.
Thank you. If you could, can you hang up, Barb? Okay, we got it. Sometimes there's a delay on our end as well. There is a slight delay on YouTube for the audience's benefit. We don't see any other callers at this time. That number again is 253-6202. And I'll go ahead with council comments in the meantime. Councilman Sherman.
I don't have any specific comments, but I guess I did like Councilman Baylor's suggestion about potentially using funding from CARES for the E911 system. It does seem to maybe fit into something that could work for us. So I hope that staff can pursue that a little bit.
It's under review, just so you know. We're looking at it already.
Thank you. Councilman Allison?
No, nothing for me. Thank you.
Okay. Vice Mayor Meyer, comments?
No comments, thanks.
Councilman Schaefer, comments?
Just a big thank you to everyone working on the management team and everyone on staff, keeping things moving along smoothly.
And Councilman Baylor?
Yeah, I think as far as the COVID money, also the addressing would be good. But I think council, I think we requested this last meeting, but maybe we could get it for our next meeting, is kind of the parameters of what this money can be spent on, if there is some good discussion on that, and what are you currently looking at? Because I think there's some, perhaps council, speaking with other people, maybe we can bring some more thoughts and ideas into this. Especially people that use the harbor and get around in other areas. There may be some things that staff isn't noticing that we could bring forward. So the more information we have, the better. And if you're already working on some things, you know, send it to us. And then thanks to the ambassadors, as I got off the plane there a couple weeks ago, they were there in kind of a rainy day, but they were smiling and doing their job. And I appreciate everybody's effort that they're putting in out there and everywhere else in staff. So thanks.
Okay. Do we have any callers? Okay, so last remaining item of business is an executive session, and entertain a motion to go into executive session to discuss the terms and conditions of CCMC sales subjects, which may be considered the matters, the immediate knowledge of which would clearly have an adverse effect on the finances of the government.
Yeah, so moved.
Second.
Motion Baylor, and that was Sherman, second?
Correct.
Okay, so we don't have anyone left in the audience here in the room, so we're gonna go ahead and mute YouTube. And
Just take the vote, just say no objection on that motion, or?
is there any objection to the motion? Okay, hearing none, we'll take a brief recess to go into executive session. YouTube's unmuted. Okay, council, we're out of executive session now. We went into executive session to discuss items in nature of which would have financial impact on adverse effect on the finances of the government, terms and conditions of CCMC sales subjects. That's just to be clear for the public record. We discussed primarily the lines of communication and the legal requirements and the legal agency of the city and who's authorized to do what, and council's designated liaison and roles of manager, and then our communications as public officials and the transparency to the public. So just to reiterate, there's no letter of interest from the Native Village of Eyak right now for purchasing the hospital. Greg Meyer's been appointed to act as liaison between the tribal council and the city council. In the meantime, the city council is very committed to healthcare in Cordova and has directed the manager to look at various options for providing that, one of which is a tribal model, which may or may not include a transfer of facilities or new facilities or repurposing of facilities. So there really has not been a lot of there have been no formalized example negotiations or anything. It's just a clarification. So reiterating that council's assigned Greg Meyer to act as liaison and city manager to assess various healthcare models. So that's it, and no action was taken during executive session, and there's no further action on this agenda.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adjourn. Is there any objection? Okay, hearing none, we're adjourned.
Take it off.